Ooh, wonder what this is going to be like. Well, the first thing I want to acknowledge is the amazing participation and the numbers that have chosen to participate in a fall program entitled Falling into Grace. Nearly 100 people have chosen to sign up and gather together in small groups in order to grow more deeply. I mean, that's really almost, well, it is amazing. I think it's an indication of what I continue to see as the case in today's world, that we really now need to know about growing more deeply within. There have been a lot of visions about returning to the past and hoping and wishing that we had what we used to have, and that can be an obstacle, can be a boulder. Something new can emerge when we all go more deeply. A little bit of tiny report is that I spent a week at a regional conference. I saw what's happening all over churches. It's pretty surprising. Lots of change. Lots of people are having to learn how to embrace lots of change. Then we had a 2-day board training that was unlike any training I've ever seen in Unity in all my 40 years. Essentially, they were saying to the board, and you'll hear more about this if you come to the town hall meeting, you want to transform a church, your leaders have to step into being spiritual leaders more fully. You've got to grow out of being children of God, and you have to become men and women of God who model spiritual integrity. And that's the only way you're going to rebuild trust and be able to connect with your community. You've also got to stop treating your congregation like children of God. They're partners in ministry, without whom you have no ministry. So there's a lot of really rich stuff coming forth that is just a lot more, it's a lot different than I'd ever seen. It seems so pertinent to us. So I'd share that with you, and I'd encourage you to consider coming down. I want to also talk about, this church is going through some changes, and I'm not going to pretend not to be up in the middle of it with you. I can't. So you can guess that Mark is being forced to undergo change too, can't you? Don't you think I could write a lesson on resurrection without having to go through some of what precedes resurrection? What precedes resurrection? What? Well, let's just say change, because the ego perceives any change as a loss or a death. We don't take to it real easy, do we, from the younger parts of ourselves. It's frightening, it can make us angry, it can cause us to judge each other. We've had plenty of that. So I'm just saying, I can only be a model of authentic leadership, which must admit that it's flawed. We all have still some parts that are flawed. At essence, I am the resurrecting power and the grace. But I can't just hop to that, can I? I can only get to that through going through, facing the other. That's the message. That's why we're on this morning. So I'm not just, never think I'm just preaching at you. I'm always teaching best what I am presently needing to learn. Enough said on that. One of the changes at NTUC that's underway is the change in the way and the amount that George and Nancy Whitten serve. We haven't seen Nancy in forever. She chose not to do much for now. There have been changes with George too. And this church, just like all human beings, has not done an excellent job of dealing with change out front, honestly and transparently and clearly. Lots of stuff has happened down under the surface in ways that have been difficult for us. I wasn't here 20-something years to know George and Nancy that well. I knew him a few times. So let's remember that Wednesday night is our opportunity to honor people that have been in service for a long time and are now with us in the midst of changes. There are changes happening. We don't want to go, oh, we're just pretending all is good and there's not any conflict and there's no change. There is change, isn't there? Are we changing? We have to face it to grow through it. So that's what I have to say, that I'm definitely going to be there, and I have a lot less relationship with George than anyone else, and I personally do honor him for having done all this. I haven't been anywhere more than about 3 years. My God, what must it be like to do your best for 25 or 30? But we're going to do that, and I hope you'll come and help do that. Now, let's be conscious about what we're doing for a change. Let's don't pretend. The message is called Resurrection in September. I'm going to show you a place that I felt like inspired to start this morning. One of your board members, with whom I do not always agree, by the way. We have a deal. We agree and disagree in love. But after my last 21 days here, or whatever these cycles are, she sent me the most awesome card. There's nothing but a blessing. Mary Gustavo, we might as well say her name. Mary, you here this morning?
Right here.
Yeah. I want you to look at what she had written on a rock. I don't know if she painted it herself. I never got around to asking her. I put it on my porch where I see it every single day. What it says on it, it says, grace happens. Grace happens. And that's a really powerful pointer, but we want to go and explore up under it. Because grace has not been recognized by most human beings most of the time throughout history. We don't see it, we don't recognize it. Sometimes grace is fierce, isn't it? Huh? I mean, we can't control life, really, can we? The ultimate message is surrender, falling, meaning letting go, being willing to let life be what it is and fall away from the judgments and the limited perceptions that are in us, instead of saying they're out there, somebody else is wrong, which is a real easy way of protecting our fragile little psyches. Huh? This is kind of deep for a Sunday morning service, but we're going to do it anyway. Okay, so let's approach it in a way that we can pretend like we're watching a movie about somebody else for a little while. And you just take in whatever part of it you think is about. Might apply to you. It's probably all about somebody else, huh? Well, anyway, the movie, The Pattern of Resurrection, is a universal pattern. It is found in all traditions and all religions and all kinds of stories. Most of the most powerful stories we see in a film underneath it, often, even Rocky was a resurrection film. You know, I mean, if you look at the pattern is always the same one. But boy, nobody gets to the resurrection without going through some stuff. Otherwise, there's not even a feeling of anything much happening. So we want to start with understanding that resurrection is a victory already accomplished in truth. It's not something we have to do. But individually, we have to look at what has to be looked at in order to open up to it and let it find an opening in us. That's ultimately all the credit goes to grace, the resurrecting power of grace, which happens. We do the opening. We be willing. So this film is not really like Wizard of Oz in the sense that everybody saw it. It's a film that starred Ellen Burstyn and Sam Shepard. And the name of it is Resurrection. How many people have seen it? Only a tiny handful. Ellen Burstyn, of course, is a very world famous, known to be one of the greatest actors in
in our generation. Recently, she wrote her biography, and she tells in the biography two things that I think are germane here, kind of make it more alive for us before I tell just the brief pieces of the film. She says she's drawn to do the role because she saw the story as a portrayal of the Christ in a feminine form for the first time. The power of the Christ being individualized through a woman. She thought it was time we at least had one example of that. So we can be sure that Christ is not a boy. She didn't say that. But then she tells us that how she got about training for the film. The film is loosely based on the story of Rosalind Bruyere, who is a world-known, authentic, documented person through whom healing happens, who underwent a near-death experience and was changed and healed herself and found that she had healing power. That's the story. And then the maturation happens after that. Now, also I think it might be interesting to know, you guys know how much I focus on the heart. Most of you know that that comes not so much directly out of unity, though many people in unity emphasize it. But for me, it came out of some studies I did for 10 years with Joy, a medical doctor who disappeared from the outer public scene and conducted deep trainings for many other ministers and spiritual leaders. He was trained at Mayo and Johns Hopkins as a medical doctor. He was a golden boy in internal medicine in LA and had a vast spiritual awakening and continued to bring forth what we call the deep awakenings and initiations. He says, first of all, that, unless the heart begins to awaken, you're not going to be able to do the deeper work, because you'll be too defended. The young psyche and the mind, which is essentially defensive, it will be too afraid to look at stuff unless it can be seen through the heart. So the heart is critical to everything. It's just a symbol, it's just a word, but it's pointing to something that is far, far deeper than thought. It's a fire, in a way, at the depth of you. It is a power that the mind can't even begin to encapsulate. And we all know it, because when we've been touched by it, the mind stops and the jaw drops open. You can even feel the warmth. So stay in that. That's the essence. Well, what did Ellen Burstyn do to prepare for the role besides talk to Rosalind Bruyere as a consultant to the film? She went to study with Joy, who serves all the healing arts more than anything else. All the new healing modalities, the leaders of Reiki, the sacred touch, they all come to Brew. Because everybody knows that all healing starts here. Right now, Chuck Preissig is doing a 21-day healing intensive, and this morning, what I read to you is that piece of that. It's a focus on the heart. We've got to have it here. We've got to have it now. We've got to have it between each other. We're not just going to make up an airy-fairy, new agey dream here. We've got to grow deeply. We're going to need the heart to do it. That's the resurrecting power. So the film, I'm just going to give you brief components of how it works. A woman is engaged to be married, buys her fiance a new car, meets him at work, picks him up, they're driving home on the Pacific Coast Highway. The kid rolls in front of him on a rollerboard. He swerves to miss the kid, and they plummet 100 yards straight down into the boulders, into an amazing crash. He's killed. She, we're not sure of until we see her body in the hospital, which eventually flatlines. So she's legally dead. During the flatline, we see that there's something still conscious. There's something she's still being aware of. She's realizing the light, that she is the light that is beyond birth and death. And then zoom, she's back in the body, and the miracle of Diane coming back has happened right there. That's the beginning of the resurrection, but only the beginning. Now she's in a body where her legs are going to be, she's told by medical science, she'll never walk again, no chance for that. We see her father, who she had a horrible relationship with and was really distanced from, has to come and get her to take her home. This is not looking like fun. First step of resurrection is right back into what? Some tough life experiences that have to be faced. The first really, really cool little symbol, and I just want you to feel it when I talk about it, is we see her and her father, who you see right away. There's all this distance, and they don't know what to say to each other, and they never have. They're driving along through the deserts in eastern California, and they come to this gas station. Just this little old weird gas station. It's got all these funny little things like a hubcap that says God is love and versa versa. And this little guy comes out. And as soon as you see him, if you have any sensitivity at all, you go, this guy's there's something else going on with him. You know, like some people got it, but they don't necessarily say it right out front. They have no need to announce it. He's just twinkling. He's telling little mystical stories and making little funny allusions. And there's a certain point at which he says, hey, you know, I got a two-headed snake in there. You know, I call her Gemini because she's got two heads. You want to see it? She says, yeah. And he starts to open her door, and she looks at this, I'm sorry, that's not going to be possible. He said, oh, that's okay. I'll go get her and bring her to you. And then you see that he's going deeper, but he's still got this light. He shows her the snake. And just before they pull off, he puts his hand on her head. And he says, honey, just remember this. When life gives you lemons, you just make yourself a batch of lemonade. But it ain't like a superficial saying. You know in that moment something has been transmitted. You can see her jolt. It's like, you know, Father was, that's a weird old character. And she goes, yeah. So she goes home, and it occurs to her once. She knows nothing about God or any of that. She's read or heard something that maybe we can participate in our own healing. And she starts to try. And you'll notice from the beginning, when she's doing it, she's putting her hand on her heart, which is, of course, how she learned from Bruce that the source of healing within is the heart. And it's, you know, she tries and she tries and she tries. Don't we all do that? We try. And then there's a moment when she just collapses and falls. And the side you see in the camera that actually some phenomena are happening in the background. So you know something's happening in the room, but that she doesn't know it yet. At the moment that she gives up, a fly is flying around the room and lands on her big toe, and she twitches her toe to get the fly out. But then she looks, and she tells her dog, look, and then she does it again. So there's a stirring of the beginning of a healing power that is actually coming into manifestation here. This is symbolic. Right now, maybe our big toe is twitching individually and as a church. Maybe it's just a little stir. But let's continue to cooperate. And, you know, she goes, yay, God, or him or her, whatever you are. And then she continues to work with it. And then we see her slowly beginning to heal and then begin to walk. And then she starts to notice that when somebody else is hurt near her, she automatically kind of wants to put her hand on it, and other people get well. She's not trying to do this, it's just happening. So put the story inside for a minute. This is an inner story of the stirring and awakening of the resurrecting, healing power in individuals. Because no church gets healed and shifted except one person at a time. One at a time. We've got to do it. So let's open to it this morning. The story goes on, and she becomes somewhat of a phenomenon in healing. This again is loosely based on an actual story. of a documented person who obviously they're somehow able to be present and people get better. But it's in the Midwest, and of course it raises all kinds of ire. Why aren't you doing this in the name of Jesus? Where's the scripture in this? And on and on. You know, it starts to create turmoil. Seem familiar? You can feel the life in this? How life is? Actually, there's a part of what we call the only marginally formed ego that's not really strong, that's not ready for awakening, that's actually afraid of this power and needs to have it projected out there. It needs to have rules. Unity is filled with people that wanted to step more deeply. But maybe we've only taken one or two steps. Maybe our toes are twitching, but we may want to open up some more. We may want to let it in us, happen in us some more. So as the troubles unfold, there's also a relationship issue that enters the picture. That's Sam Shepard's role. He's the kind of bad boy rebel of a preacher father. And that relationship goes haywire. And it just becomes nearly impossible to practice her art of healing in the Midwest. There's just too many forces against it. And what she's decided is she's going to take her little dog and leave. So she does. And the next thing you know, we're 15 years later. The time-lapse photography shows, we know time is lapsing because they're using this photography, this time-lapse photography. You see the farmhouse where she was living in Kansas begins to decay, you know, and the windmill falls over. You know years are passing. And then suddenly we're in the present. And where we are in the present of the movie is there's a great big RV rolling down California highway in the eastern desert of California. And in it is a couple of parents and a little boy that has, you can see, it doesn't take much to get that he's got cancer and he's dying. He knows it. He knows his parents are afraid. And he's concerned that his parents are so afraid. And they're busy trying to be all cheerful about it and take him on the trip. You know. And what do they come up to? The old gas station. They pull into the gas station. There's nobody around. And the father gets out and you know, hollers and looks for help, and then we hear some voice in the back, yeah, I'm coming. And it's Ellen Burstyn now with gray hair. She comes around, she don't say anything about any kind of healing, nothing. She just chats, tells little cool stories, even about the guy that used to be there. She's got Gemini, the two-headed snake now. He's in formaldehyde in a jar. You will start to sense that she, in her maturity, she moved away from the ego of a healer into more just accepting the truth of her being and trusting life to now organize itself to bring her to people or people to her that are right. And you know this little kid's going to be next. There's a little conversation that goes on around him. She gives the little kid one of the puppies of the dog that used to be hers. And he says, well, I'm not sure I can keep it because, you know, I'm dying. She said, oh, don't worry about that. And the parents, they have the same objection. Yeah, I don't know if you can take care of it. She said, oh, I think you'll be fine. Well, how can we pay you for the puppy? Well, we can't. But you can, she says to the little boy who has only patches of hair. You can. You can pay me. I'd say the price of that puppy is one big hug. And the little child moves into an embrace with her. And that's the end of the movie. And you have to be a rock yourself not to see what just happened. You know now that very silently, quietly, without fanfare, the real truth has now been passed on and transmitted. And in a way it conveys that it's always going to be transmitted It's not really somebody else we need to transmit it to. We are that one. And every part of ourselves that's been separated from it, wounded, stuck in judgment, anger, hatred, and fear, was like the little kid or the wounded person. And we need to probably just be still and look at it and hold it and trust the resurrecting power and grace in us. It also has a translation in relationship. I am paid to be a minister of a church for now, in the middle of a big change. We can't do that by pretending that there's no change here. Do it by accepting and embracing the changes as they are, and by doing my inner work. But really, we rebuild now. If we're going to rebuild, it became clear to me in the regional conferences, this is not that unusual. Life is changing. We've got to embrace the change. We have to grow deeper. We have to morph from children of God to adults, where we access this power within ourselves and we bring it into healthier relationships, which could include such things as maybe not so much gossip and telling the person directly what you have to say, or speaking directly to your board members rather than through the email to each other all the time, so that we can actually tell each other what we're going through, no matter what it is. We got to start facing stuff more directly. That's the message I heard. Wasn't that what you heard, Joe? Yeah. So this resurrecting power is in us all. And each one of us is responsible for finding it. We're partners in this ministry. Not only playing a role as leader, because I've had some experience in training them, but underneath it, I'm just like you. I've got a little guy in there that still needs a little work. Leadership wouldn't it really be more about my willingness to keep doing my work and modeling that and pretending that I have all the answers and being another mom and daddy minister? That would be the role. So anyway, let's lighten up a little bit about this and let's close it out. The conversation that I had with my mentor for many, many, many years in Unity. At one point, I wanted to know more deeply, what is this resurrection stuff about? Don't we go through many sort of crucifixions and resurrections along the way? Meaning losses and letting go and being really to open again, and then the power flows, because that's my experience. He said, yeah, Mark, he said, but you know, some people get off the cross and then they insist on dragging the damn thing around with you.